All right, thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to share some tips and tricks for how to save money with meal prep. Just again, I'm a meal prep expert, and saving money is part of the reason I started. So I'm really excited about this topic, and without further ado, let's get into it. Oh, okay. Sorry. There we go. So quick overview. If you've never heard of meal prep or don't exactly know what it is, I'm pretty sure a lot of people envision like a lot of athletes kind of doing it, like, boring chicken, broccoli, rice, kind of very repetitive meals. But if you look at these images here, that is not what it has to be. It can totally be a tool for saving time, saving money, and reducing food waste, whatever you need it to be. But today we're going to focus on money. So meal prep is basically batch cooking meals to avoid cooking and cleaning every day. You're front loading the work so that during the week you can just pull out your meal from the fridge, heat it up or not, and just eat it on the go or within 3 minutes of you getting home from work, which is awesome. So basically with meal prep, you are batch cooking like a huge pot of chili or a curry or salads or whatever meal you want basically, and you store it in the fridge or freezer until you eat them. You could just prep one meal, like just breakfast, just lunches, or just dinners. You don't have to do these giant meal preps like I do breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single week because I've been doing this for years. But I started with just lunches, and it's a really good place to start if you've never done it before. It could also be just snacks or dessert. Whatever you feel like you could kind of front load and get it done, that's the key. And it's not just for athletes and fitness pros. I have a lot of parents in my community that do it, a lot of college students. Really anyone can fit this into their lifestyle. But at the end of the day, it's really to help us save money, avoid cooking daily, and also avoid eating takeout daily, because I don't know about you guys, but I used to feel really bad when I was eating takeout every single day. So yeah, that's what meal prep is. And of course, if you want to learn more about how to do it and what it is, you can always go to my site, workweeklunch.com, or connect with me on Instagram. So I started meal prepping, like I said in the beginning, to save money. I just got out of school in 2014, and I had my first real job, and I realized how expensive it was to buy Chipotle every day. I was getting those like $12 burrito bowls, and it was really racking up. So I decided that batch cooking would be the answer. It would help me feel better, and it would help me save money because I was really bad with my money when I graduated from college. My energy levels really suffered too from I tried eating free food at the office, and that was not a good strategy because my energy levels just really suffered. Anyway, with cooking, I was able to finally get my finances under control, among other things, but cooking was a huge win for me with my money. Okay, so you've probably realized by now that with meal prep, you are probably going to be eating the same things a few times. And the number one barrier between us and getting to start with meal prep is repetition. People don't want to eat the same thing over and over again, and I totally get that. Like, why would you want to eat a chili 5 days in a row? I'm not sure. That might not sound great to us, but we don't have to do that. And I've discovered a lot of different ways to keep it interesting, keep it fresh, and very creative, so I'm never really repeating the same recipe week to week. So I found out that with meal prep, if you want to make it work for you, if you want to try to prep for just 3 days. Like, instead of meal prepping for 7 days, which is just a lot, and by the 7th day your food is not going to taste so great, just think about doing it for 2 to 3 days, or even start by making dinner and then having leftovers for the next day. That is still a form of meal prep you could try. Also, you could try a buffet meal prep, and that's when you cook individual portions of ingredients. So for example, just rice or just sweet potatoes, just chicken, and then you put it together throughout the week. So every day you can have a kind of different meal with similar elements. So I would say if you are looking at this and you're like, wow, I don't want to eat the same thing every day to save money, I'm telling you, you don't have to. There's ways to get creative, and I hope that I'm helping get your mind around that. So money, that's over here. How does meal prep help me save money? So with what I found with meal prep and batch cooking is that you're more likely to use up all of your produce, right? So if you're a cook, you probably have been in this situation before. You come home with a bunch of groceries, and you have leftover pepper, leftover onion, leftover spinach, and then you just kind of forget about it in your fridge. It spoils and ends up in the trash. wasting food is kind of like wasting money because you're paying for it and then it goes in the trash. It's awful. It's bad for the environment and it just feels terrible. I know we'll never be perfect, but meal prep can really help us avoid the bulk of the food waste we normally make if we are cooking just individual meals. So that's the number one way I think meal prep saves us money. We get to stretch our ingredients for a longer distance with more meals. Also, more home cooked meals equals less takeout. So if you are buying, for example, a $12 Chipotle, meal, you can make the same meal. You can make the same recipe, like 3 of those servings for the same price. You can make 3 burrito bowls at home for $12. So that's kind of the idea with meal prep and saving money is just if you can buy it for takeout, you could probably make it at home for a lot cheaper. Also, you're less likely to need a last minute meal. So if you've ever been running around or you just have a really crazy busy day at work and then you come home and you have more stuff after work and you don't have time to make something, you're more likely to get a delivery or takeout or a pizza or just something that you have to buy. But with meal prep, it's already in your fridge waiting for you. What else? Also, you can focus on very simple meal templates. Meal prep is not gourmet cooking. We're not going to be using expensive cheeses and expensive meats. We're using staples like rice, pasta, beans, and things that are already cheap in the grocery store. Lastly, with meal prep, it's really easy to use up what's in your pantry. A lot of the things I just mentioned, like rice, pasta, and beans, are amazing pantry staples, and they can last for actual years. Like canned beans last for like 3 years. It's amazing. So this is kind of the overview of how meal prep can actually save you a lot of money on food, if you stick with it, of course. So again, if you're wondering like, what am I going to cook for the week that I'll actually eat? I recommend starting with what you like to get at restaurants and takeout. So if you're a Chipotle fan, I keep going to this Chipotle example, but if you like Mexican food, there are so many Mexican-inspired recipes you could meal prep and eat and enjoy instead of having to buy it. You don't have to do the boring chicken broccoli rice thing for meal prep. So that's kind of the main ways that it'll save you money. So I want to get a little bit more into how to avoid wasting food. First of all, planning is key. I think this is kind of the missing step that a lot of people kind of skip over, is you can go to the store, you can buy a bunch of ingredients, and you can come home with the intention of meal prepping. But if you skip that planning part, you're going to end up with some odds and ends of ingredients. You're going to end up with some random meals that you might not like. Planning entails choosing your recipes beforehand, taking inventory of what's already in your kitchen so you don't have to buy it, and then also deciding how many meals you're going to need to eat in the week so that you don't under or overcook. Because the worst is when you cook too much and then you don't get to it all in time, then it goes in the trash. So planning is really important, and that's kind of what I focus on at Workweek Lunch, is helping people plan out a realistic kind of meal prep schedule. So batch cooking, like I said earlier, you're using up the whole ingredient. And that's what I love about my recipes and recipe developing, is when I create a recipe, I'm always like, how can I use up this whole pound of chicken? How can I use up this whole can of chickpeas? So you're not left over with like a random cup of chickpeas at the end that you don't know what to do with. Another thing I've found with meal prep to help us avoid wasting food is that we don't have to worry so much about what ingredients go with what meals and flavor profiles. I found that a lot of different vegetables and fruits especially can go in just so many kinds of different meals. You might think like, well, I'm making a chili. Well, what does summer squash go in chili? Why not? Like, you don't have to worry so much about mixing and matching ingredients properly. You can kind of get really creative, and especially with vegetables, throw anything in the pot and I promise it'll taste good. I think my one rule of thumb is maybe don't put tomatoes in Asian inspired food because they don't usually use tomatoes. It's like the one example I could think of. So another thing is to avoid gourmet recipes that call for less common ingredients. And the reason this is important for avoiding wasting food is that gourmet recipes will call for ingredients that you need a little bit of, you have to buy a whole package of it, and then it ends up sitting in your pantry or fridge until it goes bad and unused and forgotten. So when you're looking at recipes, make sure that they have ingredients you're definitely going to use again. And then, of course, leave room for the spontaneous meals. That's another thing that fits into planning. So let's just say you plan 3 lunches for the week, but then on Wednesday you have like a catered lunch at work. And then you can easily push that lunch to the next day or for dinner that night. Whereas if you prep too many meals, you have no room for spontaneous like food situations, and you can't move those meals around as flexibly. So that's another reason why I tell people to plan for half the week or prep for half the week and see what happens, because you never know what's going to come up or what's going to happen in your schedule that causes you to have to push a meal or skip it for some reason. So these are my best tips for avoiding wasting food, which avoids us wasting money. Another question I get a lot is, isn't buying healthy food more expensive? And I say no. You don't have to shop at health stores to eat healthy. I mean, with Whole Foods specifically, since Amazon bought it, its prices have gone down. But you don't have to go to these specialty organic stores or anything like that to eat healthy food. And you definitely don't have to buy organic to be healthy. Organic is often more expensive. But my philosophy is I'd rather eat an apple, even if it's like a generic apple, than eat an organic bag of chips. Like, you know what I mean? I would rather just eat the piece of fruit, whether it's organic or not, than reach for something else. So that's kind of my philosophy if you're really trying to save money. Obviously, if organic is important to you and you really, it's a high priority and you can afford it and it's all good, great, keep doing that. But also another thing to keep in mind is that cheap foods that doesn't always mean they're unhealthy, right? So like canned goods and frozen vegetables, those are generally pretty cheap. That doesn't mean they're not healthy. They're perfectly viable options if that's what's in your budget. And of course, home cooked meals will always be a better option than restaurant meals because you have way more control over what's in them according to your dietary needs, your preferences, your family's preferences. And that's what I love about cooking is you can really make it your own. Whereas with fast food and takeout options, you just can't. You can't control anything. So that's kind of my philosophy on why eating healthy is not more expensive. Okay, so let's just say you're watching this and you're like, I don't know if meal prep is for me, but you still want to save money on groceries. I definitely have some tips for you. So the number one tip, like this is, if there's anything you take away from this presentation, it's this: shop your pantry and your freezer. Look at what's already in your kitchen and see how you can use it, because if it's already there, it's already been accounted for in your budget somewhere in the past and you don't have to buy it. It's awesome. This is what I do every single week. I focus heavily on what I already have, and my grocery bills are really low week to week. Of course, I bought those things in a previous grocery haul, but I usually go to Costco where things are, great to buy in bulk. That's the next point, is buying in bulk can help you a lot. So Costco is kind of new in my life, but I've been loving it and definitely saving a lot of money with it. Of course, you can buy in bulk at Walmart, Target, and other stores that don't require a membership if you don't have a membership or access to it. But even Whole Foods and other regular grocery stores have bulk options, especially for rice and pastas. They have like these big boxes. So I would say buy in bulk for non-perishables when you can. Also, avoiding impulse buys. This is a big one at the grocery store. If you don't go in with a list, if you don't have a plan, you're going to throw things in your cart that you definitely won't need or won't use up, or they look cool, and then they go in your cart and they just get forgotten. This happens to me at Trader Joe's pretty much every time I go. I've come home with things like vegan mayo, harissa sauce, and like all kinds of other ingredients that I just totally didn't use. Luckily, they weren't perishable, so it was fine, but I kind of go back and I'm like, why did I buy that? So I would say try to have a plan and stick to it. My rule is I allow myself one impulse buy per shopping trip, and that usually ends up being kombucha. So I would say that's kind of another really big one that will help you a lot in the grocery store. And then the last one is, packaged foods tend to be a little bit more expensive than whole foods, meaning whole ingredients. So I would say if you can bake your own snacks and dessert at home, you're going to be saving a lot more money at the grocery store than if you buy packaged stuff. I'm not saying packaged stuff is bad. Of course, if it's on sale, if you love it, if it makes sense, get it. But that's just another way to kind of cut your grocery costs down a little bit. Awesome. So let's get into like what a food budget might actually look like. And I'm using very whole numbers here just to keep it simple. And on this little grid, I have like different categories: groceries, takeout, and restaurants. And then in the middle column, I have what it would be for one person in New York City, if you're cooking and meal prepping a lot. And the other side is one person in New York City if you're not cooking a lot. Again, these are like just kind of random numbers. I'm sure it'll look different for everyone. But here's an example of how you can kind of adjust your grocery budget within the categories, sorry, your food budget within the categories that are important to you. Maybe you're someone who loves eating out and loves takeout and you don't mind. Maybe you have a commissary at your work where you have discounted meals for purchase, and that's kind of really important to your work schedule. You can make your food budget based on what your preferences are and your lifestyle is and what your habits are. You don't have to do anything crazy and like slash your grocery budget in half just to, you know, save money. Do what makes sense for you. Also, there are a lot of factors with a grocery and food budget, like how many people you're feeding, your income, what grocery stores are near you and available to you, where you live, what's in season is a really big one, like what produce is in season can really affect your grocery budget, how much you eat, and of course your dietary needs. For example, gluten-free products are going to be more expensive than regular products. That's just kind of how it is sometimes. So yeah, I would say when you're looking at your food budget, you can kind of check back on what you've spent in the past in each category, and even add categories like coffee and alcohol. I include those in my food budget, and you know, also some people include household items they would normally pick up at the grocery store in their food budget too, because they're just buying it all in one place. So those are some factors to think about when you're looking, you know, you're kind of combing your you're coming through your food budget. And I hope that helps you if you kind of don't know what to spend. It's really hard because this is not a fixed expense like rent or bills. It's going to change a little bit every month. But I think that once you know your preferences and your lifestyle and you kind of think around that, you can get it to a really consistent place. All right, let's talk about some food money mistakes to avoid. And we've talked about this a little bit, but letting ingredients spoil before you cook with them is probably the biggest and most common mistake. It happens to everyone. It happens to me still, but we can avoid it. So how to avoid it? Make a plan for each ingredient. What meal is it going to go into? You can have also like, so here's a weird issue that happens. Some people will go to the grocery store and buy all their groceries with the intention of meal prep, but then they don't make time to meal prep or cook, and then all the groceries go bad. So you have to make sure you have a designated time to do your cooking, whether it's once a night, if you don't want to meal prep, or it's, on Sunday for a few hours, which is what I do. So make sure you put it in your calendar, treat it like an appointment so that your groceries don't go bad. When in doubt, I'll just say you have a bag of spinach, it's on its last legs, and you don't know what to do with it, look it up online, check if you can freeze it. You can freeze most things. There are some pieces of produce I wouldn't freeze, but there are a lot that I would. Also, you never know. There are ways to elongate the shelf life of your produce, so I would definitely look into that if you are running into this problem a lot. And of course, no one's perfect. We're all going to end up with food scraps at the end of the week. I recommend looking into how to compost, which is kind of a better way to manage your food waste instead of throwing it in the trash. In New York City, there's a lot of ways to compost. I have to walk mine to the library where there's little compost bins. I would say it's totally worth it because I don't like throwing my food scraps in the trash. So when in doubt, if it's the last resort, you can compost if that's an option near you. Another mistake that comes up a lot is doubling up on items you already have. I went to Costco a couple months ago and I bought a bag of sugar when I already had another bag of sugar I hadn't even opened yet. So now I have two, and it's just why did I do that? I should have checked. Should have taken my own advice. So the way to avoid that is to take inventory of what's in your freezer and pantry. So I do this probably once a quarter for my pantry, but my freezer I do it more often because I'm using my freezer a little more and it's smaller. So on my freezer I have a whiteboard, and I can show you guys my little whiteboard at the end during our Q&A if you want, but I have a whiteboard with everything in my freezer, and I kind of change the number of servings as I use them, as I take things out and add things to the freezer. It helps me so much. I don't have to dig in there to figure out what I have. It's all right there on this whiteboard. So yeah, that's another way to avoid buying things you already own. And then again, planning to use what you already have, get rid of stuff before you buy it. That's a really good idea. If you do double up, try to make sure it's non-perishable. And again, when in doubt, you can give stuff away to your neighbors, family, friends, or pantry if you have too much of something and you need more space, or you're just never going to use it. All right, now the last mistake mistake I think people make that they may not realize is that they're buying brand name products that are insanely expensive. This happens a lot with peanut butter. So I have a picture of peanut butter here. This Barney almond butter is $12. That is so much. We don't need to spend that much on almond butter or peanut butter ever, because you should definitely look for generic or store brand products instead. Just because it's generic or store brand doesn't mean it's unhealthy. In fact, I found that Kirkland's, like Costco's brand of peanut butter, is way better in terms of ingredients than some other peanut butters on the market. So you definitely should trust the generic and store brand products. They're always going to be cheaper, and that's a really easy way to save some money. Another thing I used to do is, if you have multiple grocery stores near you, you can always look online to see what's on sale and kind of compare prices. If you have the time, if that's something you're interested in doing, you can always kind of build a cart and see what your grocery bill might be if you shop at that store. The last thing is, labels like organic and natural, they don't have that much meaning these days. Like, this is not regulated at all, and unfortunately, so I hope that you guys are savvy enough to know that just because it's organic and it's more expensive doesn't actually mean it's like better for you in any way. So that's how to avoid that mistake. All right, guys, so I've thrown a lot at you, and I hope that the messages are getting through, especially on planning and shopping your pantry. But if you're still wondering how to make meal prep work for you, I can definitely help with that. So I think the first thing you want to do is decide what meals you want to prepare in advance for the week. Like I said earlier, I started with just lunches. Like, I decided I was going to make 3 or 4 lunches and just eat that from Monday to Wednesday or Thursday. And that actually was such a good place for me to start. I did not start doing all 3 meals for 2 people. I just started with 4 meals for 1 person. Very manageable. You want to think about how many meals you actually eat at home versus work or out with friends, your significant other, or like wherever else you're eating food. Think about what meals you're eating at home and what can you prep in advance, and make sure that you leave room for the meals you want to eat out, because, I think it'd be pretty miserable to eat 100% of your meals at home. Unless you like that, I personally wouldn't, especially in a place like New York City where there are so many amazing restaurants. I definitely enjoy my weekend meals out and like my home cooked meals during the week. Then think about, when can you spend a chunk of time cooking? For me, it's now I do it on Saturday nights. It just happens to be the flow of my business. I cook on Saturday nights, but I used to do it Monday nights when I had a regular 9-to-5 job. So just think about when you actually want to spend time cooking, when it would be relaxing. And I recommend, opening your favorite beverage, like a kombucha or a beer, a glass of wine, throwing on a podcast or some music, and really making it like self-care. It doesn't have to be this chore. And then the last question you want to think about is, do you need variety, or are you okay with repetition? That will affect the recipes you use and how you meal prep. Okay, so again, we've talked a lot about planning, and planning is key to saving money and making meal prep work. So you first want to look at your calendar. Again, you can do this on pen and paper. You can do this in Excel, which is what I do. You can do it in a notes app. It doesn't matter how you do it. It just matters that you do it. So look at your calendar, for the week, and just look at what social events you have going on, parties, work things where there will be food and you don't need to prep, and then decide how many you're going to eat at home and meal prep. So that's the first step for the meal plan. The second step would be choosing recipes that you actually enjoy. Don't choose boring, like what you think of healthy meals that are just bland and will dry out or just be gross. You want to prep things that you'll actually look forward to. And my personal favorite right now, I do a lot of curries, I do a lot of pasta dishes, and a lot of stir fries. I love stir fries. The last thing is to make sure to leave room for spontaneity, because then you'll have a chance to move the meals around and you won't end up wasting them. So if you've never meal prepped before, I hope that you can get some meal prep containers, that you'll take inventory of your kitchen, you'll plan ahead, and you can always come to my site, workweeklunch.com, for free recipes, or use Pinterest. There's a lot, and then get cooking. So I would love to open the floor to questions, because I'm sure that there's a lot.
Yes. Thank you, Talia. We'll get started on Q&A. If you have a question now, you can use the chat box, or you can email info@savvyladies.org. First question for you is asking, How do you decide how much bulk you should buy? Do you just buy one of the bulk packages at a time?
That's a great question. I would start with buying just one of the bulk packages to see how fast you go through it, and then the next time you'll know how much you really need. If maybe it'll take you months, maybe it'll take you weeks, so then you'll know if you should buy more.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is, my husband and I recently realized how much we're spending on takeout and restaurants and decided to scale back so we could save money. I want to meal prep, but we have very different food preferences. Lately, I've been finding I'm sticking with our meal prep goals, and my husband is really resorting to takeout. Do you have some meal prep tips for two people that have very different tastes?
Sure. I mean, that's a really tough one, and it's very common, so you're not alone. My first thing to try would be having your husband or partner cook for themselves too. If it's really that different, that could be, you don't have to do all the cooking yourself. If you can somehow get them in on it, also choosing meals. Like if you could cook meals that he would normally get for takeout, that could be an option, because takeout meals are usually pretty meal prep friendly for the most part. So I would say that's another thing I would try. And, I mean, it depends on what your financial goals are and how strict you are with your budgets, but it could be that as long as he's not going over budget, maybe it's okay. Like, you guys could tweak your budget to fit that if that's, possible.
Okay, thanks. And this question just came in asking about the whiteboard that you mentioned. You able to show us that?
Okay, so it's going to be backwards, and I apologize. But this is my whiteboard that's on my freezer, and I've separated it by meat, vegetables, other, and then I have a little out of section. So the numbers indicate the serving amount for each item. And when I run out of something or use it, I just wipe it off and rewrite it. So this has been really handy, so I never have to go and digging through my freezer to see what I have.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Talia.
Yeah, of course.
Another question for you is asking about how to know how much time food can last in the fridge. Do you have kind of some general guidelines for that?
That's a great question. I would say most meals are good 3 to 4 days. Anything up to 6 or 7 days, technically, you're still safe. It's still going to be okay as long as you've cooked it properly. But that's when it starts to get not so great tasting. So my rule of thumb is 3 to 4 days for most meals in the fridge.
Okay, thanks. We do have a few more questions. Do you have time for
some? I have time, totally. I can go through them.
Okay, this question is, how can one meal prep to have a variety of meals instead of eating the same thing for several days?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of ways to do this. The simplest way would be the buffet meal prep I mentioned earlier, where you're prepping individual ingredients. So, a bowl of pasta, a bowl of rice, some chicken, and some tofu, and some vegetables. And then you're building meals as you go throughout your week. So you're kind of just adding a protein, a veggie, and a carb to your plate, depending on what you've made for your buffet meal prep. Like a buffet, you're just kind of picking and choosing. That's like probably the easiest way. The more advanced way would be choosing recipes with overlapping ingredients. So you're cooking full meals, which is the style that I have, where I'm making complete meals, so I don't have to do the buffet thing. But you're kind of choosing recipes with overlapping ingredients so that you have the variety without buying so many things. For example, if you did like a chili and a stir fry that both have bell pepper in it, you're having two completely different meals with different flavor profiles that both use the same vegetable.
Okay, thank you. This next question is asking about reheating and taste. So specifically rice reheating and tasting bad. Do you have some tips on when you're reheating food?
Yes. So reheating rice specifically is really tricky. It can get dry and crumbly and just like not fun to eat. So my best advice is to add a little bit of water or olive oil or just sauce or something before you reheat it and mix it around, and that helps a lot. Also, if you can keep it partially covered in the microwave, that kind of steams it back to life. In terms of just general reheating practices, I use the microwave for pretty much everything, and it's fine, just for a minute to 90 seconds. But you can absolutely use the stove and your oven.
All right. Thanks for those tips.
Sure.
Another question is asking about freezing meat after you've cooked it, and then how to defrost it and the length of time. Do you have advice for that?
It really depends on like how you've initially cooked it and also how big of a portion it is. I think the microwave defrost setting is pretty safe, and I've also had a lot of good luck with reheating frozen stuff on the stove, like in a pot with some water, and you cover it, and that's kind of how I generally reheat meat.
Okay, thank you. And I believe this is the last question for you, asking if you think it's worth it to pay to be a member to those bulk type stores if you're really just cooking for yourself or one other person not wanting to waste food.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I just started using Costco 9 months ago, but I only started it when I moved in with my boyfriend. I don't know if I would have used it for just one. I think for just one person, you're better off at Target or Walmart, where you can still buy like big amounts of something, like large, but without having to buy so much of it. But if you're cooking a lot, and it's like you're cooking a lot of the same things, like a lot of rice, a lot of beans, and pasta and stuff, then it could be worth it.
Okay, and I said that was the last question, but do you have time for one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this is asking, what do you think about meal kits?
Sure, I think that if you're trying to save money, they're not really the best idea. You don't have a lot of control over the ingredients you're getting and where they're coming from, and they make a ton of waste, and also they end up being like just a really high cost per portion. I would say that if you're trying to save money, shopping and cooking yourself is the way to go. If you need more convenience, then the meal kits can be fine.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Well, I want to thank you, Talia, for an excellent presentation. There were so many tips in there. We all learned a lot. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today and asking questions. And Talia, I believe you have a worksheet or a resource sheet that we'll be sharing with everyone. So you can look for that soon. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much, Talia.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.